guys, tonight we're making orange ginger carrots. This is a pickle recipe from the University of California Extension Office. I'll leave the recipe I used linked down below, and I'll leave notes on some of the small changes that I made. Before we get started, we're going to get our jars warming up in the canner. Remember, you always want hot product going into hot jars. That way you won't have any jars breaking from thermal shock. Because this is a pickle recipe, it's high in acidity, we're going to do this in a water bath canner. This recipe makes about 7 500ml jars, and I've added in an extra 250ml jar with them as well, just in case. We're going to need 5 pounds of peeled and diced carrots. Go ahead and keep the peels that were still good and put them into a freezer bag. These can be used to make broth on a pressure canning day. I'm using one of these little wave cutters for chopping up the carrots. We also use this for making our bread and butter pickles. It's not necessary, but it's definitely a fun extra. I'm going to get all of these cut up into about 1/2 inch thick slices. The university's recipe calls for the carrots to be blanched first, but I'll be skipping that step. The tested recipe for dilled carrots also doesn't blanch them, so I'm comfortable with not blanching for these. Take our ginger and get it all peeled. We're going to need about 3 tablespoons of finely chopped ginger. Now, I am by no means a chef, and I'm not real fussy on my chopping skills. Done is better than perfect. I'm going to start out by cutting some thin slices from the ginger. Once I really got into it, I'm going to pull the slices back out and cut them into some finer strips. That's close enough for me to julienne. The size difference is minimal and shouldn't affect the safety. We also need the zest from 2 oranges. I'm going to use a standard peeler for this and just try not to push it in too deep so we don't get as much of the white pith that can be bitter. You can see here a piece that doesn't have very much pith compared to the one that has a bit more of it. This small amount should be fine, so we'll go with it. I'm going to slice up the peel into smaller strips similar to the ginger. We're going to use 2 different vinegars. Both of them are a 5% acidity. You can easily swap out your vinegars in a recipe for equal amounts as long as the acid level is 5%. I'm going to use 3 cups of apple cider vinegar and 3 cups of white vinegar for a total of 6 cups. The apple cider vinegar will help add a small bit of sweetness to your pickles. They'll have a little bit of tang still, but not quite as much. This is also how I use vinegar for my dill pickles. For pickle brine to be safe, you also want to make sure you have no less than a 50-50 ratio for your vinegar to water. We're also going to need 2 cups of water, half a cup of pickling salt, and 2 cups of white sugar. In a large stainless steel pot, we're going to add our vinegar, water, sugar, ginger, and pickling salt. Stir everything to combine, and we're going to bring this up to a boil and make sure the sugar is dissolved. It'll start out looking a little cloudy, but that should clear up once we get it up to a boil. Once it's come up to a boil, we're going to add all of our chopped carrots. Do this part carefully. That brine is hot and it's probably going to splash. We're also going to add in our orange zest as well. Stir again and bring it back up to a boil. Once it's at a boil, we're going to remove it from the heat and start filling our jars. We're going to fill these one at a time and make sure we're using something to help remove any air bubbles that might be hiding. You want to make sure you're getting some of that ginger and some of the orange peels in each jar as well. Pack the carrots in and top with your brine up to 1/2 inch headspace. You want to wipe the top edge of the jar with a clean damp cloth and use a new flat lid. Put the ring on fingertip tight and then the jar can go back into the canner. Repeat that same process for the rest of the jars. Now I'm glad that I warmed up that extra jar. There was enough carrots and brine left to fill up a 250 ml jar. We'll process this jar for the same time as the 500 ml jars. The extra jars are nice to have on hand if you need something to tuck into a gift basket. Once all the jars are filled and in the canner, you want at least 2 inches of water over the lids. We're going to put the lid on the pot and bring the canning pot up to a full rolling boil. Now that it's at a full rolling boil that can't be stirred down, we're going to leave the lid on and set the timer for 15 minutes. You'll need to stay at that full rolling boil for the full 15 minutes. If you're over 1,000 feet for elevation, you'll have to adjust your time. Once the timer's done, turn the heat off and remove the lid from the canner. Let that sit for 5 minutes and then we can go ahead and start removing the jars. Place the jars on a cooling rack and let them sit undisturbed for 24 hours. After 24 hours, you can check your seals. Don't forget to remove the rings for storage. If any of them haven't sealed, you can reprocess them with a new flat lid or just pop them into the fridge and eat those ones first.